Obviously, there's a lot of environmental issues that are unknowns. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but are you familiar with the hydroelectric facility, the Ludington Pump Storage Facility? In, I think the year, I'm 38 years old, I think it was right when I was born, 1971, that facility came online, somewhere right around there. In one sense, this is it's a feather in the cap of the Mason, Oceana County area, because you have one of what was at the time the world's largest hydroelectric facility. There are unforeseen consequences. There's been tremendous fish kill, in the hundreds of millions of fish per year. My line of thinking there is simply that it makes sense to demonstrate a technology before you deploy it in huge scale. And using examples from areas that are completely different is not going to answer the questions here.
Most of Michigan's electricity is from coal-based power plants, and that coal comes from two places, Wyoming and Appalachia, places, parts of Kentucky and West Virginia.
Michigan has primarily coal-fired plants. You have to keep feeding it coal.
Coal-based electricity plants produce lots of mercury. Most of the mercury that's in the Great Lakes system is from coal-burning power plants, and that mercury leads to fish consumption advisories. You've probably heard about warnings, not to eat fish more than, say, once a week from some of the lakes. Pregnant women or women of childbearing age are specifically warned to limit their fish consumption because of the mercury contamination from coal-burning power plants. So compared with the status quo, wind energy really would improve the chemical pollution situation in the Great Lakes.
And you can't tell me fossil fuels are going to go down in cost. Plus the fact that I'm not going to say whether I'm really a total believer in global warming or not, but I'm definitely a believer that putting pollutants in the atmosphere is not helpful.
Coal might be a cheaper alternative, but you're not paying for the number of lives that are lost prematurely because of air pollution. You're not paying for the environmental degradation of the fish consumption advisories because of the mercury that's in the Great Lakes. You're not paying for the environmental degradation of mountaintop removal in West Virginia. So there are lots of aspects of coal that you're not paying for. If you really paid for and internalized all those costs, both the social and environmental costs, they would be far more expensive than a wind power facility.
My experience with the Great Lakes and Michigan, the roads, anywhere, my basement walls, stuff freezes, it thaws, it cracks, concrete cracks. And the idea was, well, when we're done with these, we just pump the water right out and float them away. I don't see that happening. So what are you left with? You're left with hundreds of these giant concrete structures on the bottomlands of the Great Lakes. We have no precedent for anything like that in the state of Michigan. And the idea of having permanent structures out there that can't be removed and with any kind of economic likelihood is bad. I think that whatever method is used to construct foundations should be something that can be removed in its entirety.
To what extent the fishery industry will be affected, I think it will be positive. I think that these structures support the fishery industry?
I mean, I could understand that, you know, just a tiny bit if we were in a saltwater ecosystem where you would end up with the barnacle coral reef growth that would draw the fish to the structures. But here in Lake Michigan, I think I just don't see it.
And it's been shown that wind turbines can serve as artificial reefs, that they provide three-dimensional structure under the water. So you have not only the tower and the base, but also what they call scour protection underneath the water, which prevents erosion from the currents around the base of the turbine. So the scour protection consists of things like large boulders and rocks and gravel, or in some cases artificial seagrass that holds sand in place, but usually it's large boulders, riprap, things like that. And that provides lots of nooks and crannies for small fish to hide in, for mussels to colonize, and for all kinds of marine and aquatic creatures to live in. So it provides a three-dimensional structure that can serve as a habitat that otherwise wouldn't be there, especially in Lake Michigan where you have a more muddy type of bottom.
I spoke to a local fisherman. I'm not a big fisherman, so I don't know. He said he thought the fishing would be better. I hear people say, well, how are you going to navigate between them? At closest, they're going to be a half a mile apart. What size boat do you have?
It may act as a fish aggregating device, so it looks like it'll bring fish to the area, but it's unclear if it'll increase the overall number of fish in the population, which is a concern. It might make the fishing better, but if you're removing more fish and catching more fish without an overall increase in the number of fish in the population, you may be driving the system towards overfishing.
Seems to me like my last understanding of the bird industry, since the turbines are so gigantic and they turn so relatively slow, they might kill like 1.3 birds a year. I hit more birds with that one than my car.
In an offshore environment, there are typically fewer birds out there. There are some migrating birds, but they're usually migrating at a higher altitude. Some of the large birds have been shown to fly between the turbines, and they're usually set about half a mile apart. So there's a lot of space in between. The science has shown that birds, especially things like geese, large birds, can maneuver through the wind farm in an offshore setting without a problem.
They didn't point this out before, but I just learned migration pattern of birds is within 3 miles of the shore, inland or out in the water. Well, we're 6 miles out here. They're not going to be out there. First of all, they can't eat, they can't land. You know, it doesn't make any sense.
There needs to be more science in a site-specific area to make sure that proper steps are taken to mitigate any impacts they would have.
I think wind energy is a great idea. I just think we have to be ever so cautious.
Because a few years back, everybody thought ethanol would be the save-all of everything. We would take corn and we would take this corn and make it into ethanol, and then we'd have all the gas we need and we'd be golden. Well, beside the fact it made food prices go through the roof, nobody really wanted to use it. The manufacturers really didn't want to have their cars done, and huge problems like in South America where there were forests that were really helping the ecology, that people were trimming to nothing so they could grow more corn for ethanol. We have ethanol plants in Michigan that aren't even running.